Hi, welcome back to Conversations. I'm Bill Kristol, joined again by our 2020 election expert, Mike Murphy. We've had two of these conversations in the last 6-7 weeks, and just looking at them this morning, they stood up well. We spoke at the very, very beginning of September 1st, and we discussed the race, which was then about Biden +7 nationally. And you said, Mike, that you thought September was the key month where Trump would have to make a move. People focus on October, but September is when a challenger really or an incumbent who's behind has a chance to really make up ground. Mm-hmm. We then spoke the day after the debate on September. I think the debate was the 29th. We spoke on the 30th. Trump hadn't made up ground in September, and your initial analysis of the debate was that Trump hadn't helped himself there either. I think right after we posted that conversation, Trump, we've learned out that he had COVID, and then he went to the hospital, and it's been a huge amount of chaos. The Supreme Court hearings since then, and almost 3 weeks since then. But the race doesn't seem to have changed much. So what's going on? What's with the underlying? Is it a stable race? Is it? How can it be so stable with so much chaos? And
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, first, it's great to be back on what I think we ought to retitle the never-ending conversation. But it's good. Luckily, my dad owns the network here, so you have to take me. You're right. I mean, unlike many of our past exploits, we actually have been getting this one right. It is kind of what it appears to be.
Knock on wood.
Well, we're going to
totally
screw it up now.
It's like,
Trump is surging. It's not showing up in the polling.
Greatest comeback in American political history.
Well, we should do 2 minutes of that and tweet it out first, just to see what kind of neurotic panic. We found with a super blind test based on data analytics that people are lying to pollsters, and Trump's actually 4 ahead. It's unbelievable. Do a little Nate Silver thing and just start a massive panic.
I don't want to be responsible for the heart attacks and the people booking flights to Canada and to New Zealand on November 4th and so forth.
All my Hollywood friends out here are on these text chains, and I avoid them because they're wonderful people, but it's exhausting. And every once in a while, there's like, what does Mike think? And, pop up like on my wife's phone. And when she's not looking, I'll grab it. Huge Trump surge. It's unbelievable. Just to send them all off to the psychiatrist office. But what is going on? Well, this is an ironic race because we have had about 14 October surprises already by traditional standards. We've had a debate that the Bobby Berensini chimp out would be like, too much, too many antics, something classier needed. So one earthquake after another hits the race. But the truth is, this race in the pure political horse race sense is incredibly boring. It's been dug in for 100 days. And as we talked about, Trump missed his opportunity to at least try a cogent plan to get back in the race with a sane strategy. They also blew all their money on, red hats and rallies and particularly Facebook prospecting for new donors before the convention during the era of Parscale and, Kushner, who's really pulling all the shots. I mean, if there's a chief moron in the Trump world who's blown an impossible campaign to begin with, it is he. And now I guess he's back. It looks like they might be on campaign manager number 6. If Katie Walsh is going back in there, she's the latest rumor. So that's, by the way, the worst job in America, Trump campaign manager, because one, there's no campaign. There's just the rantings of a lunatic, and there's no management because of the lunatic is not going to be managed. So you're basically standing there watching it all burn down. So here we are 2 weeks out. As we do this, depending on final turnout, if you look at the historical numbers versus what this year could be, which should be a very big turnout election hampered only by COVID, do people actually vote on election day or do we have a big drop-off there? 1 out of 5 votes is already cast, maybe 1 out of 4, kind of depending. So, the window for anything to happen is shrinking mathematically as people vote already. And every day that gets bigger. Election day is now 10 days long. So by the 28th, in the old days, you could have the cliffhanger the last 7 days of the election. That's much less now because the last 7 days of the election is increasingly affecting less than half the electorate. So what'll happen? Well, there's only one big marquee event left. Another Titanic debate between these guys. Joe, who's been doing pretty well, but still nobody's going to mistake him for a 45-year-old. At the pinnacle of his game, and the president, who nobody's going to mistake for a sane, well-balanced, thoughtful human being. So the question is, will anything happen in the debate to make news? Because Trump, as we've said forever, needs traction, needs an issue, and needs day upon day upon day of the debate shifting to his terrain, which, the Republican polls will tell you is the economy. But Trump just doesn't seem to be able to make a case for himself. I think emotionally he's so rattled, and he just wakes up every day, I got to kill Biden. So they go put him in a hockey arena with, 3,000 soon-to-be COVID patients. And he bleats a lot of crazy stuff about Biden, thinking the louder and crazier it gets, the more impact he'll have, and then nothing really happens. So, I think it'll be more of the same. It'll be a bit excruciating. Maybe Biden will have a bad debate. I mean, if he's shrewd, he won't. Maybe Trump will improve, and then we're kind of there. I mean, the last thing I'll say is we're now down to again, we often say the Republicans under Trump are the stupid party and the Democrats are always the neurotic party. Well, this is a particularly hard time for the neurotic party because every day they can go to Real Clear Politics or 538.com and look at new polls and panic appropriately. In some ways, the margin of error takes over the campaign among people watching it now because, there's been a 3-point shift in North Carolina. Well, the margin of error is 3. And it's incredibly hard to do polling now because people are so crowded with information. The participation rates, which are low to begin with, get even lower. So, people do IVR robot polls that last a minute. They try to do it all on texting, SMS. They try to do it all online when you really need a hybrid approach. So the data is a little less reliable. Statistically, it's better because you're close to a point where people have made decisions. But the ability to field and actually talk to people in a balanced way to have a sample that represents the greater electorate becomes a little harder because a lot of the electorate doesn't want to play and won't agree to the polling. So I tell people, if you don't look, if you want to do anything, volunteer, help the campaign, but if you have to be a spectator for your own mental health, only pick even or odd, flip a coin. Heads, you only look on even numbered days. Tails, you only look on odd numbered days. And we'll see what happens. But to me, again, as you said, it looks like a very steady race right now.
Do you discount the possibility of any of the Hunter Biden type stuff becoming serious and really costing Biden much, or if anything?
If the whole debate is so there's one, I will say, first of all, that remember, you've got 44% of the country-ish that is locked in for Donald Trump. And you got around 48% to 50% that appears to be pretty locked in for Joe Biden, and a few points that are maybe non-voters, maybe truly undecided left. So each campaign can feed their own herd some food. And if you're part of the 44%, you're going to zero right in on Fox, and you're going to be telling your friends all about Hunter Biden, the Russian agent, and, you're getting your food. But does it change the outcome? You're already for Trump. And over on the other side, you're going to tune into Rachel Maddow and find out that Trump, is likes to suck blood every Thursday night from a freshly slaughtered, calf. And there's your food. The question is, does anything change the race so the topic at every water cooler in America for 3 days straight is something new and big, new information about Joe Biden that would rock the race? Maybe. There's a little clip from CBS News a few nights ago where a tired end of day, busting his ass on the campaign trail, Joe Biden is climbing on a campaign jet, and some CBS reporter, hey, what about the New York Post story? And Biden really pops at the guy.
Yeah.
I know you want to print that kind of crap. Y'all do. And classic, all of us who've done campaigns know the candidates tend to hate the media because of the thing they wrote about him in 78 times 10. So he popped off at this guy who was kind of some meek, CBS stringer. And so I'm sure the Trump guys saw that. I'm sure they're telling Trump, you got to get him to explode about his kid. So I think there'll be a lot of stuff about Burisma. By the way, the average voter in swing Michigan or in Florida, Volusia County sitting there, Burisma is like the skin disease your grandmother got. It's just, but in the noise making, I think you will see Trump try to get Biden's temper to blow. Now, if I were coaching Biden, I would say, Joe, you did well last time when you were talking to the camera. So talk to the camera, ignore Trump. Just open it up. Say, look, I want to tell you where we're going as a country. Now, I'm debating an orangutan, so you're going to hear a lot of screaming. He'll probably try to throw the chair at the audience, and we know what we got over on the other side of the room, so let me talk about what I'm going to do. And not go back and forth with him, because then it will be, Hunter, 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 and then Biden may fall for the bait. Hopefully he won't. Biden's got something to lose here. He'll hopefully be, not let Trump get away with that. But yeah, if Biden does something, the race is in Biden's hand now. If he responds to a provocation from Trump in the wrong way, he could create a couple of days of stuff that would get in the way of his perfect landing. My guess is they won't do that, and it would take something really big. I mean, nobody wakes up, trying to figure out how to get their business reopened and how to, they're 2 months behind on the mortgage, and their grandmother is in a nursing home where there have been COVID troubles. They're not going to call their spouse from the car and say, honey, this election is now about whether or not Joe Biden's son took money from a Ukrainian national gas company that had links to a prosecutor that the UN later found to be corrupt. I don't think there's a lot of handle on it.
You were worried a little bit, I would say, in both of our previous conversations, beginning and end of September, that Trump retained some edge on the economy, it seemed, and that the Biden campaign hadn't quite maybe done as much as they could have to tie the health problem, the pandemic problem, to the economic slowdown, and to also make clear that they have a plan to reopen the economy, that they're not just deferring to public health experts, that they are that, but that the connection of the health issue to the economic issue. Do you think they've addressed that pretty well? I mean, it's a little hard to tell.
Trump is still hanging on. The one thing people think Trump is better than Biden at is running the economy. That's why Trump keeps saying, hey, guess what? Next week you take a pill and there's no more COVID, so let's talk about the economy. That's their whole strategy. And my view is that Trump number is a little too big in advance. If he were winning the economy by 4 points, I wouldn't care. But I've seen in some of the swing states more like, 8, 9, 10. In Florida, one of our main final ads in Project Orange Crush, which is our independent expenditure for Biden against Trump, is about Biden's economic plan, because we're just trying to cut that edge a little, because that's the only loose end on the election, the only real advantage Trump has. And I've always thought the Biden campaign could have done more there. But all in all, I think the Biden campaign has done a very good job. And they're a little lucky, and luck helps. They've had Biden being unable to campaign has been good because he's escaped a lot of scrutiny. This hasn't been the classic campaign where the media chews on one candidate, goes and chews on another, and then comes back. They pretty much only chewed on Trump. Part of that is the media hates Trump. I mean, you're not going to have future journalism professors look at this campaign and talk about its great fairness in journalism. I mean, it's been a feeding frenzy. But Trump earned it. I'm one of these kind of pearl clutchers about media fairness. I've complained about the liberal media often in my career. But Trump has been so awful and beyond the pale. He deserves most of the trouble he's gotten. But it's still been a bit lucky for Biden. The other great Biden luck is the Trump guys led by Kushner, the idiot son-in-law, blew $800 million stupidly. Literally a team of chimpanzees couldn't have done worse. And so Biden has been able to way outmuscle Trump on television and paid advertising in September and October, plus the independent groups like ours and others. So Biden has had a real advantage on kind of the TV battlefront because they've been very rational about their campaign. They're running a sophisticated, modern campaign, and the Trump people, frankly, aren't. And it's underfunded. It's based on the whims of Trump. So Biden has benefited from all that as well. So I don't have a lot of criticism of the Biden campaign other than Trump is like the big tarantula, even though tarantulas don't have webs. So bad analogy. He is a large spider hanging from a filament, the economy. If you could cut that filament, the spider would vanish.
You've taken a look, since you're interested in this professionally, at a lot of the Biden ads, which a lot of us haven't seen. I mean, unless maybe some of them now are shown nationally, so you can see them on football and whatever. But obviously, if you're not in a swing state, you don't see the bulk of them. Your impression is their actual voter contact in terms of the TV ads, the digital, other ways of getting in touch with people, text, mail, has been pretty sensible. I mean, pretty sound.
Oh, yeah. No, I think they've done a good job. Yeah, to see a Trump ad, you've got to be in Washington.
Yeah,
where you're seeing Trump and Lincoln Project ads there because they're all about the president's head. And, a Trump ad is something they show the president he likes. So it's like a cartoon squirrel with Hunter on him in a top hat holding an acorn that says, it's like if you let the crankiest high-dollar donors in the campaign write the ads. The Biden stuff is all tested and I think pretty sharp. The only front I think they could have prosecuted better is the economy. But, look, Biden right now is in a good, good to very good position in the 3 states that they typically switched last time to elect Trump president in a narrow vote outcome: Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The problem is all those states have a slow count. Pennsylvania has some trouble with their new absentee law, and Michigan and Wisconsin do not allow the state to start counting absentee ballots and early ballots until Election Day. So the Michigan Secretary of State says it'll take, a week to count everything. So there's going to be a little turbulence in the returns. But in all those key states, Biden's doing well. Trump is in trouble in all of them. He's not on the offense anywhere, and he's being massively out-resourced. Then you get to and if, Biden wins all 3, bingo, Biden's president. Then you get to, is there any state that Trump may switch that he didn't win last time? The answer is no. They've made a few tries in Minnesota where the Republicans come close. Trump was about 45,000 votes away last time, but they're pulling their ads there because that is uphill. I mean, it's a white play because it's one of the, quote, whitest, most Caucasian states, but it's also a state that still has a lot of white Democrats. So that's been a problem for Trump. And then you look at the opportunity states where Biden is definitely in the hunt. Arizona, where he's ahead, you can debate how much, but if I had to bet of one of the 3 non-Great Lakes states, I bet Trump loses Arizona. Florida, where Biden is ahead, but narrowly. It's a race in Florida. Biden has a slight advantage. I think he's most likely to win, but we're seeing. We're working hard there. And then North Carolina, which is also tight, with a competitive Senate race, too. The race in Arizona is not that competitive. The Democrats, I think, are very likely to pick up that seat there, defeat McSally and elect Kelly. So Biden's in 3 of Trump's backyard states, leading at least by a little bit. Then you got places like Georgia, where Biden's in the hunt for a possible upset, or Ohio. And Iowa, even. So, Trump, let's put it this way, the whole game is being played in Trump's end zone right now, which is not where you want to be when the other guy's got more money, a lead in the national polling, and half the country thinks you're out of your mind, and you got a candidate you cannot rely on to execute any kind of disciplined, coherent strategy. He'll just chew the carpet and respond to whims. So, yeah.
I want to,
again, it's kind of a boring race.
Yeah, I know. Well, let me ask you about that, too, because another side of the, so to speak, boring race, which is, then I want to get to more what you've learned in Florida and some of the more particular interesting issues of this year. But it seems to me if we'd been having this conversation 6 months ago, and we did actually, everyone was interested. What would it look like to have a presidential election in a COVID year? I mean, it's so insane.
Yeah.
So much of our presidential campaign, so much of our campaigns in general is personal, the candidate out there 12 hours a day, door knocking by volunteers, voting in person mostly. It seems to me actually that it turned out, well, I don't know. Did it turn out to be less of an issue in a funny way than we all expected? Did people seem to have adjusted, or what do you make of that?
Well, I think as a political issue, we know some things, we don't know others. We know it was good for Biden that he had a legitimate excuse not to be under the media crucible as much as a typical challenger would have been. 2, it gave Trump an opportunity on a campaign level to fail just like he has on the public policy level about COVID. In other words, he's holding these rallies where, only girly men wear masks. And so that's created a whole storyline that not only is he bungling with Clorox and fish tank lights and all the other madness, he's literally dragging his own supporters into a dangerous public health situation. Ask the ghost of Herman Cain. So that's created a whole tragic Trump aspect. Then you've got Trump telling everybody that, they can't trust vote by mail. And so he's forcing his own voters, who historically many Republicans have been reliable vote by mail voters, to grapple with the idea, how do you vote in a pandemic, particularly if it's surging back. So if you're a Trump voter in a winter state like Michigan or Wisconsin, you're now going to be most likely by November 3rd voting in person if you listen to the president, because you don't trust early voting or mail-in a time where there's likely to be a COVID surge in some of those states because people are going indoors and all the the realities of public health. So he's shooting himself in the foot. You even see appeals at the state level by the technocrats in the party saying, please go ahead, vote by mail, it's okay. Even in Florida, the president started to say it. So he's kind of shot himself in the foot there. And then finally, we don't really know what the effect of COVID will be on turnout in the end. We know it's caused a massive surge in early voting and absentee voting, but in behavior, people choosing to do that. But we don't know on election day yet what people are going to do, particularly if 30 days from now, or 2 weeks from now, the numbers have surged even more, particularly in those states. So, and it's changed the technical stuff. So you can't canvass door to door. Well, put it this way, the Biden campaign has suspended a lot of their normal program. The Republicans have not. The Republicans in several states have done a better job than the Democrats, atypically, of registering new voters. Florida is a good example of that. And the Republicans have been able to do the door-to-door stuff. Now, a lot of that, in my view, in a presidential race is a bit overrated, but the Biden campaign has not played on that ground. The Republicans, to the extent they're able to, have. Nevada is an interesting case because the old machine there, which is one of the last old great people machines in American politics built by the despicable Harry Reid, for some reason I've always despised Harry Reid. Well, a lot of good reasons, actually. The Romney smear, what he did on 60 vote for judges. But anyway, putting all that aside, that machine, heavily built around the Culinary Workers Union in Clark County, where the big casinos are and where the bulk of the population is very much built on rallies, meetings, personal canvassing, classic union organizing, and they've been very effective. Well, one of their top consultants, who's a good friend of mine, was on Hacks on Tap, Mark Mellman, and he was saying, one reason there's concern is the machine can only run in low gear in the era of COVID. They can't do the mass rallies and the turnout stuff they normally do. And the Trump people have read that, and they've made a big effort, also because Sheldon Adelson, one of their enabling fundraisers on a huge level, and his wife Miriam are there, and they probably want to please them. Now, the demography and other factors in Nevada will probably defeat Trump, but that's an example where COVID has probably net been better for the Republicans than the Democrats because it's hobbled a machine that relies a lot on the kind of personal stuff you just can't do in COVID. So, we'll be sorting through this, but it hasn't been like the only factor, which I think some hyperventilating pundits, which is the pundit business now is more about hyperventilating than experience or insight, maybe predicted in the beginning.
Yeah, it seems like it's right. And as you said earlier, it's in a way been a normal election. And despite the pandemic and despite Trump as incumbent, I mean, all these crazy things that somehow at the end of the day, the public had its view and that was it. I mean, I guess one thing looking back when historians or political scientists look back at this election where they'll say there really was a change, a breakthrough almost, don't you think, is campaign finance, where we've seen a lot of this building up over the last several cycles, the possibility of just massive and quick small dollar donations. But we're now at a level really different from, don't you think, from anything we've seen before, just in the quantity, both at the presidential level and now at the Senate and congressional level.
Yeah, no, it's been a 20-year climb. I remember in McCain in 2000 when I was working there, when we won New Hampshire, we literally had a warehouse full of people getting emails with credit card numbers, running the numbers manually, and millions of dollars were pouring in. Today, it's pretty sophisticated, and the Democrats get a little credit because the Republicans have done this too in kind of a catch-up way, but the Dems had this idea of how do we make it really, really easy to email a donor and get a credit card donation? And how do we create a universe, a back end, a machine that can do that across candidates? So, Comrade Bill Kristol for Congress gets a $25 donation from somebody, and then let's say I'm that donor, and then a week later I want to give to Joe Biden or a frisky Cal Cunningham in North Carolina, a Senate candidate. Once I'm in the ecosystem, it's easier for me essentially with one click to give money.
Right.
And so that has made it one.
No, it's Amazon. I've been giving money to a few candidates. It's Amazon-like in its ease.
Right.
I mean, and I guess people have enough disposable income that they're not going to have a heart attack about $25 or $100 or $250, and they just give over. And you do think, I mean, I even find this myself. You read a story, someone seems like an attractive candidate who might have more of a chance than you realized. What can you do? You're sitting here. Well, what you can do is you can go online, click $100, $200, and that adds up, right?
Exactly. So they have made it very frictionless, as the internet commerce people would say, and they've kept all the credit cards if you give consent into big databases. So the whole ecosystem, and it works very well. The other thing is in the old days, for fundraising, if you were a high dollar donor, you were giving your $1,000. or more, depending on the kind of fundraiser. And you're standing next to a nice sculpture, and the candidate's making a speech, and there's a photo line. There's a fair amount of overhead, and it's a time sink for the candidates who mostly hate to do it, because the guy who's the plastic coat hanger king will come up and chew their ear off that he made the big switch from metal to plastic coat hangers, and that's the kind of genius we need to solve whatever the pet issue of the third wife is. So the candidates, boy, oh boy, it was never that fun to be a candidate after one of those things. And of course they had to do 10 a day. It would drive. Mitt Romney told me a very funny story in the middle of his presidential campaign. He says, "Yeah, you know what my life is like?" Because Mitt is a great kvetcher. Privately, you don't see it in public. He's like, "Yeah, I go to 3 fundraising events in the morning every damn day, and I show up, and I do the photo line, and people are mostly nice, but there's always one guy who comes up to me and say, 'Hey, Mitt, you got a problem.' 'Oh, what do you think it is?' 'You're stiff. People think you're really stiff.' And he goes, 'I get that 14 times a day. I want to grab him by the lapels and say, 'You think I don't know?' You think I haven't heard that?" I remember Quayle. Tom Ellis came up, "Vice President Quayle, people think you're stupid. You got to learn Russian. You talk some Russian at them, they won't think you're stupid anymore." So this is what those fundraisers used to be like. Drove the candidates crazy.
Drove the chief of staff to the candidate and the campaign strategist for the candidate crazy too, right?
Yeah,
Since the immediate follow-up by any intelligent candidate was, "You know what? That's a good point. Why don't you talk to Bill over here, and he'll follow up on that." And how do the plastic coat hangers work, sir? How would that be effective for getting our whole economy going again?
No, exactly. That guy's got some good ideas. Talk to him, and then you're in for an hour and a half at the coat hanger factory, and starts bringing up Mein Kampf, and giving you a few pointers from anyway. We've lived that life. Point is, with this fundraising, look, I'm not saying Hitler was right, Bill, but boy, oh boy, what he did for the National Rail Service there in '39. I have a train collection I painted just like the Schloss Special down in the basement. You want to see it? I've also got his toothbrush. So now we have a crazy donor like that as president. That's what's always struck me as funny as Trump. He's like that guy we all had to deal with. So with this, for low dollar in the old days, you would send people a letter, which would cost 85 cents, and you would pay copywriters and tri-state envelope and everybody to make the damn thing, and they computerized. They'd go out, and 4% of them would send you back $39, and at the end of it, you'd spend $1 million to raise about net $100,000. At most, or you'd lose money. And the direct mail guys would say, "Well, we spent $2 million, we got back $1.8 million," and the campaign manager would say, "Yeah, so we just blew $200,000 on this stupid thing." Well, no, those letters have an impact, which was never true because you were mailing hardcore donors who were already decided. That $200,000 though yielded you 1,014 new donors. We're going to mail them again, and we're going to make money on the House file, which they would, but they wouldn't make much money. The cost of fundraising was very high. You wouldn't net a lot. So like the old Pat Buchanan for President campaign would always like, "My God, they've raised $30 million." Yeah, but they made 3. It was this big mail machine churning.
Which wasn't simply consultants, though. It was partly
no, it was the
getting
only
a
way
good
to do
cut.
it.
It was the only way to do it. But the famous House file that was finally going to produce. But even when it did produce, you're right, it produced literally like $3 million after months
it was
of
inexpensive, and it took a lot of time, and it took very hot language. It was like a catalog business, expensive based on repeat customers or repeat donations. Well, now with when you click the button on that email to send Mark Kelly $25.
Yeah.
Over $20 is going to the candidate. If they're running a really lean operation, 22. So the cost, like many things in the digital world, has been crushed. And it means that the campaign manager can say, "Hey, Mark, we got $200,000 in today, of which, $180,000 is in the account. Real money, we can do stuff." So and then last thing is, it's so fast. In direct mail, you had to time ahead in waves. With this, Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. 5 hours later, it starts, and a week later, there's $200 million new dollars because it hit a moment, which the speed of digital can do, and that's been tremendous for these Democratic Senate races. They're giving away Cadillacs now because they have almost unlimited money. Jamie Harrison is running TV ads on MSNBC, telling people to give to him online, and it's making money. So that has created a new world. And Trump, that Facebook spending I was criticizing Parscale for. I remember my dear friends David Plouffe and David Axelrod wrote this big piece in the New York Times, which the Biden people thoroughly enjoyed, about damn it, get going. You idiots, which the last campaign staff always is going to do, because they're always on Mount
The
Olympus.
last winning campaign.
Right,
staff
right.
is
It's natural. I mean, believe me, if McCain had won, I'd be impossible right now. I don't know why they don't have a bus, But Pluff was worked up about all the Facebook spending. It's a clever campaign to get into the hearts and minds of the... No, I kept saying, no, it's just another direct mail scam done on Facebook, because that's what Parscale did. Nobody believed me, but now we know it's actually true, because people always repeat. You hire a magician, you're not going to get a song and dance routine. You're going to get magic tricks. Well, Parscale was a Facebook click fundraiser, and they were spending money on massive amounts of Facebook ads trying to get new people to click, go into their database for voter stuff, but the people they were targeting were predictably Trump voters anyway, limited value there, and get a $5 donation out of them, so House File, they can go back electronically and raise more. And that's really what all that... There was no brilliant voter plan going on. And Kushner, I'm sure, said, hey, we can buy more ads and make more money. Great. It was a catalog business selling red hats. They sold, and if you sell 44% of the country a red hat, you've got a tremendous hat business, but you don't have enough votes to win a presidential campaign. You can easily spend $1 billion doing that.
What I'm just curious, like in the era of COVID, so you've been making ads. This is quite good, I believe, but how's that worked? What's it been like? I mean, how different has that been also, just compared to...
Well, part of this same digital revolution that's changed everything else is in the old days, you'd build a $5 million room full of equipment, and you'd all sit there with crappy takeout food at 3 a.m. Making ads. Now, so much of it is done on digital stations. You can have the sound guy. I mean, in Hollywood, it works this way, too. The sound mixer's in New Zealand, and the file's electronically transmitted to the editor in Burbank, California. The cinematographer lives in Charlotte, North Carolina, who shot the material, is looking at it, based on a shoot in Miami. And so you're all kind of interconnected. So we did a spot for our Phase 1 advertising with some real people. Well, they were actors, but they're all Florida Democrats, and they were all for Biden. But I wanted people who knew how to perform on camera, so we shot it down in Miami. And we literally had a transmitter plugged into the camera. So I was sitting in Los Angeles, California, seeing what the cameraman's seeing, talking to the cameraman. No, scotch tighter, on the third beat, pan over. And then there was I had a guy standing there, and I was in his ear, a great producer named Eric Calderon. And I'd be like, no, give some direction. And it would go to the actors. So it was all done remotely.
So they were there.
Digital.
I mean, the cameraman and the...
Yeah, but we had a COVID consultant on set.
Right.
We stripped the crew way down, one, because we're cheap, so this was shot like it wasn't quite grocery cart dolly, but it was fast. And everybody was 6 feet, everybody was PPE, and we had like a certified COVID person who was part of the production community in Florida, who would walk around every hour. The camera would get wiped down and everything. I mean, like a cop there on top of it to make sure, and it slows you down. It's particularly hard to do the company move, as we say in production, where you load up all the cameras and everything and move to the next place, because you got to wipe everything down. Then the crew, and we're doing temperature checks. They were able to get all this stuff. So it's a 30% slowdown. But the stuff we were doing, which was one actor and a couple of background people doing a line, is a lot easier than a big. I've got a TV pilot at CBS we're getting ready to shoot, and we got crowd scenes. And so the happiest people in Hollywood right now are the digital houses that can fake a crowd, electronically. Because we can't shoot real crowds. You can't put 100 extras in a fake Rayburn office building running up and down the hall. So you have to composite it all, which you can do. It's expensive. And then we have 50 shows trying. The 5 people who do it are all like, well, what does a Rolls Royce go? That's my new rate. But anyway, it slows you down. It's difficult. And frankly, a lot more of it. You see it in the Biden ads. A lot of our Biden ads... the Biden campaign ads, you see a lot of the same footage that you can buy, good stills over the years and stuff from the beginning of the campaign, the primaries. And, we have to pay big license fees. An ad that should cost $16,000 costs $30,000 because we're paying Getty Images a lot of money. But you will see some of the same images in everybody's ads because Biden's not out there doing complicated shoots with a crowd loving him because, one, COVID, they can't get close enough, and two, the logistics are tough.
Yeah, I remember in the old days you used to have your own campaign cameraman. You did this for us in Bush Quail 92, I remember.
Yeah.
Travel with you and then take their own shots of the crowds, adoring crowds, exciting moments, it's a
Right.
dynamic
Right.
speech and so forth. And of course, a lot of that doesn't happen anymore. Maybe
Yeah, I mean, I'll never forget when we were working for Bush Quayle. I won't tell the story, we'd burn up an hour, but we were on this ridiculous tour of New Hampshire.
yeah, this was your
And,
great story.
Holiday of the Cow, yeah.
Yeah.
But, we were there the day before to plan everything. It was all, it was made for TV, both for the news, and we had our own crews there. A lot of that is gone now. I mean, Biden gives a big speech. I'm sure they have a camera there. But even the way the camera operates, you got to distance everybody. And, it's pretty hard to operate a camera with a face shield and a PPE mask. So you see more one person talking, and again, at Republican Voters Against Trump, a lot of our stuff, most of it, we're doing the more high production stuff down in Florida, but a lot of the other stuff is just real Republicans talking to their camera, and people are responding to it because they're living through Zoom. So seeing somebody talk to a laptop with bad lighting and that kind of naturalism now is very normal. It's the vernacular of the conversation we're having in our lives on every level. So it's working as advertising, which is kind of fascinating. And that's
that is interesting. I wonder if that will last afterwards. Let me ask you just a couple more things. We'll let people get back to working on Zoom. Senate races, you have a view on how that's likely to show up?
Yeah, it could be a wave. It could be a wave. The thing about what's funny about waves, I'm old enough. First time I was working as a volunteer as a kid and everything. First time I was really involved was 82 as a puppy. But I lived through 80. And then I've lived through crashes like 82, where 86, you can pick one every few years. So what happens is you never quite see it coming in the polling.
Right.
Everybody in campaigns is insecure, so when in doubt, look at the polling. Now I can relax or I can be more excited. When the polling is not, it's not rocket science. They try to make it that, but humans are involved and there are issues. So, you see there's some trouble, but you have the poll. Well, it's 47 Jerry Denton, 46. God, I can't remember who beat Denton in '86.
Yeah,
anyway, Democrat. But we're the incumbent. We got more turnout, and they doing all these rationalizations. But the left-handed voters, they're not going to like the precincts and the new map. And then, pow, it's a 5-point jump for the other guy, and you're dead. So this feels like that a little. Although, if you look at it more analytically, still pretty good for the Democrats. Now, they're highly likely to win Colorado and Maine. That's 2. They are highly likely to lose Arizona. We are, the Republicans, so that's 3. Doug Jones, it's Alabama, man, it's tough, probably loses. So now, 3 turns into 2. But you have races like Joni Ernst, who's in super big trouble in Iowa. I think she may very well go down. Georgia's not totally locked up. Cal Cunningham, despite his fascinating texting life, is still slightly ahead. There's another pickup. Montana, COVID has hit Montana, so Governor Bullock is no longer quite the Superman he was a while ago. Maybe Daines will hang on, but that is a competitive race. You start going through them, and you can kind of get to the 4. So if I had to bet, I would bet with the national dynamic, if it's 8 points on Election Day, the Dems will win the Senate. And it could pop pretty big, which means even like a Lindsey Graham, who I think right now I'd have to say is favored to win, even though I know there's another one where the polls are tied. Well, it's South Carolina. But if it was a wave, he'd lose. Yeah. Mitch will hang on. Sorry, donors. But there are a few, the Daines, maybe even Dr. Al Gross up in Alaska, a state that's so hard to poll. He's a couple points behind, but that's striking distance in a year like this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the greater polarization makes a big wave a little. There are probably fewer voters in play in the last 10 days, which is what you sort of need, that late break that you had in 80, and Republicans picked up 12 Senate seats. That I do remember being an assistant professor and watching it at Penn and at Philadelphia, and just, and hearing from people. I vaguely knew people sort of close to the Reagan campaign. I also knew, I worked for Moynihan 4 years before, so I knew him and people obviously on his staff. And I remember someone on Moynihan's staff telling me the weekend before, they had heard rumors that the Reagan's pollster, Worthland, was saying it was breaking open for him, and that actual Senate seats were in play that no one expected, that D'Amato could win in New York, and in Pennsylvania the Republicans could win. And I mean, And I remember thinking, boy, that sounds But those days were so much different without the internet. So you were looking at polls that were in newspapers, that were polls that were done 4 days before.
Right.
Now you do have a little more instantaneity, though not fully, of course. People do forget that polls.
And the phone polling worked better then, so
Yes.
you got a better hint. So I would say more likely than not, the Republicans lose the Senate, and there's a chance that I wouldn't say 50%, but I'd say more than 20%. That there's a wave and the Dems do really well, which could also get them into double digits in the House. Right now, I think we're looking at losing 7, 8, 9 House seats, but if it's a wave, we'll get up to 12, 15.
Yeah. What about, okay, well, that will be interesting, and that'll be for our first post-election conversation about what the implications of all this would be for the Republican Party, for the Democratic Party, for the Biden administration, if there is one. But let's take a minute on that now. There's been a lot of early forecasting of, well, assuming Trump loses, what does it mean? Do we have a Trumpy party? Do we have a post-Trump party? Is a civil war in the Republican Party? You've been around for a while and been through a few losses and the after effects. I think the one thing one can say is they're hard to predict. I'm not sure that people have gotten the effects of these right, in the short term. They often have like weird contrarian effects, I would say somehow. But like after 2012, everyone's agreement was, okay, the autopsy, we need to reach out more to Latino voters, and we need a more updated message. And we can't
really the donors,
we can't sound as conservative. And you worked for Jeb in 2015-16, which I think embodied a lot of that message, really. And
we got thrown out a saloon window.
You
don't want it.
So I mean, so these things are hard to predict. But having said that, do you have any views on the sort of
first of all, the conventional wisdom factory in D.C. lives by the assumption that tomorrow will be pretty much yesterday. So Trump's had an iron grip on the Republicans. They're all gutless cowards except for Romney. And so in the future, Trump will have an iron grip on the Republicans, and they're all gutless cowards except for Romney. So and Axelrod and I argue about this all the time. That theory, and he's a very smart guy, might be right. But that theory is that Trump will be the sun god of the Republican Party for the future, and nothing's going to change. And a Trump son, daughter, Trump again, will run again, and the Republican Party, Trumpism is here to stay forever. And I disagree with that. That's based on the future being the same as now. And if we know anything about politics, things change. Parties are very dynamic. Look at the domestic policy of the Nixon administration. EPA, old moderate republicanism. People then would have said, oh, they would never see a Republican Party of Ronald Reagan. He's a kook actor from California. Well, then that happened. And then, oh, you're never going to get away from Reaganism and have a kind of a Sunbelt compassionate conservatism, the kind of stuff that George W. Bush was for. And then you're never going to have a reality show populist thug so this you're always going to have thing I instantly refuse to buy. Now, my guess, and this is a guess, I could be wrong, is that Trump losing will not be good for Trumpism because parties do not reward the loss of power. And I think the one thing I'm certain of in the future is, despite Joe Biden, to his credit, has tried to hold a centrist position in Democratic politics. He was against Bernie's agenda, most of it, in the primaries, and he was losing elections for a while. The progressive left is not going to stop. The identity politics fetish is going to grow. The seeing America as a confederation of groups with varying grievances rather than a whole idea. The cancel culture is going to reach absurdity. And there's going to be a window for Americans who have more of a center-right perspective, and they're going to be looking for a political party. The question is, can the Republican Party evolve to meet that interest in the marketplace, that opportunity with kind of small L liberal democracy, free trade, the stuff we built the franchise on more or less with variations for a long time? Or are we going to be the populist party of the pissed-off shoe salesman in the dying mall who doesn't like the fact a lot of dark-skinned customers are showing up now? So, we know what Trumpism is. We know it doesn't work politically. We know we've been wiped out 4 years in a row with it. Other than Trump's win, we've lost 9 governorships. We lost the House. Now we're going to probably lose the presidency, and the left is going to run wild. So will there be room for a cult of personality Trumpism in the future fight? Absolutely. It'll be a factor. But I think there will be other green shoots. And I think it'll be, the joke I use is like the Chinese Civil War in the 20s. There are going to be 20 warlords. with 300 troops in an armored car running around declaring themselves emperor of North Carolina or whatever. There will be the governors who remain mostly pragmatic. There are exceptions. This knucklehead Abbott in Texas is a huge disappointment. But there are the Larry Hogans and the Charlie Bakers and the Mike DeWines. You know, they're out there, and we're going to get more of them. And there's going to be tension between state-based Republican government and legislators, who, by the way, often have an advantage in presidential races because they've actually been executives and done something, and the D.C. windbags, you know, where there are only 20 senators trying to be Trump light, the Josh Hawleys, the Tom Cottons, who've kind of been poisoned by the sauce. And Cruz, of course, is perennially Cruz. But, you know, we're see. So I think it'll be much more of kind of a struggle for the future of the party with far more arguments and ideas joshing around than just Trump goes to elbow and we all wait his orders. You know, Sarah Palin, in a much lesser way, was never president. But there was a moment where the media at least perceived and people acted like she ran the Republican Party for 100 days. Right now, for $500, you can hire her to open your new car wash. So I don't think political power is guaranteed and stationary. The last thing is Trump's got trouble. He's got the Southern District of New York, you know, interested in his tax evasion, allegedly, potentially. He is in hawk and levered up. He's in commercial real estate, which is a tough sector to be super levered in. Trump's going to go back to a lot of problems. Now, will he try to be the center of attention? Bet your life on it. That's, you know, his psychological problem, and he needs it like a junkie craves heroin. But I'm not sure his grip will be what it was. So it might be like a French restaurant in Paris after the Bolshevik Revolution where, you know, there's one of the waiters is a former count of Siberia and he's got about 14 followers. And, you know, it could be the Romanovs. But I don't buy this Trump lock forever. I think there's going to be a big fight and Trump will be one of the sides, or Trumpism. And you know, it's important we extinguish it. And I know that's what I'm going to be trying to do, and we'll see. No, but I could be wrong.
Well, but it's a useful
reminder. The future may be the past.
Of how unpredictable these things are and contrarian sometimes. And also, I mean, some of the commentary by my friends, I mean, the true never-Trumpers, I think people deep down kind of think, well, they're not, you know, we're not going to be at the center of things because we were too much against Trump, which is probably true. But, of course, there's a lot of people in between the Trumpists and the never-Trumpers. They've been disappointing to a lot of us, and they're not profiles in courage. But that doesn't mean they couldn't also be important in the future of the party. And they would be different from Trump, even though they wouldn't be profiles in courage, right? I mean, Nixon vaguely supported Goldwater in '64, didn't stand up to him. Disappointed, I'm sure, a lot of people in the center of the Republican Party. Didn't, you know, sound like Bill Scranton or Nelson Rockefeller, but he got the nomination in '68 and went in a pretty different direction from Goldwater. So one can imagine that kind of thing, I suppose, happening. Though Trump having been president, you just don't know how much of a difference that makes, I guess. I always come back to that. It's different from Goldwater, different from McGovern. But anyway, it's very fluid.
Today, how much power does Bill Clinton have over the Democratic Party? Well, how much power does Jimmy Carter have? You know, if people underestimate the power of new. I think whoever can answer the question, what do we do about the left? How do we govern and how do we win? You know, if you can hit those three notes loud and clear, you got a future in the Republican Party after this collapse.
Interesting. And don't you think also, I think the magnitude of the defeat, if there is one, matters. Holding the Senate would create a very different psychological dynamic, I think, from losing the presidency and the Senate.
Yep.
And losing the presidency and the Senate, but kind of close, and Florida's 1.5 points, and they hold Texas, is one thing. You know, losing Florida and Arizona and North Carolina and maybe Texas being very close.
Ohio.
Yeah, then you're suddenly looking at, geez, there's not like a single large state that we
you're
could
pushing
win.
400 electoral votes. The governors are in tatters, and we're back to the minority days in the House. And then right of center voters get to live under a new world with different policy. The craving for a comeback will be tremendous, but I think Trump will have such a stench of defeat and more scandal on him. It's not like Trump's reputation is going to get better. They're going to be looking, what's the most powerful word in advertising? New. And Donald Trump, after the rubble of a defeat that wiped out the political power of the Republican Party, he ain't new. Maybe a Trump kid is new, but he still has the stench, or daughter. We'll see. But I think it's much more of an open brawl than the idea that Trump will just move to the Winter Palace and continue to issue orders.
We need to discuss that after the election with maybe Jonathan Last or someone else who's
Oh, yeah. No, I read his
alarmed.
story, and he's a smart guy.
It'd be an
Yeah.
interesting debate, actually, or not debate, but just speculation about
Yeah.
where things might go. With there are some historical analogies and also points one could look to then going forward that would be inflection points. But for now, thank you for this very interesting analysis.
You know what the good news is, Bill? Unlike when we started this thing, we won't have to leave the country after the election day.
If it goes as we now think. But
As
there's still,
the polling indicates, right?
but
Exactly.
yes, but there's still that
I was
chance.
working on my Irish passport just in case, but
There's
I
still
think we're
that-
going to be all right.
Still that chance. But anyway, thank you for the analysis, which I think has genuinely been. I mean, knock on wood. I think you've, as I say, the first two discussions stood up well, conversations stood up well, and we'll see if this one does. But
Well, I've been wrong before,
and
so
we've
we'll see if we
stipulated that there are all kinds of weird things can happen, and God knows it's such a crazy time. It's almost impossible to believe that we're going to have just a smooth, steady as it goes 2 weeks. But I guess we'll see. So, Mike Murphy, thank you for joining me here
As
on this
always,
conversation.
thank you, Bill. I enjoy it.
And thank you for joining us on Conversations.